Welcome to another edition of Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc. I am Dr. Steve Wood, and with me again is my co-host, my buddy, Bill Kanasky. Bill, how is it?
What a rough 24 hours. I got to tell you. I didn't shave my head. I did not shave my head today. I just pulled it all out by hand. Everything going wrong. I mean, and then I'm starting an argument on LinkedIn. You know, you gotta be careful with that stuff. But I'm going to tell you why I just started an argument is that a company, just go on my page, you'll see it. I'm not going to mention them. Company this happened within 30 minutes ago to all their, thousands of followers. It said the number one way to prevent a nuclear verdict is by developing better safety and compliance protocols. Huh?
Yeah.
No. So I went, did you read my response yet? Did you read it?
I have not. I'm going to
read it after the pie. I did respond twice. Like, people, what the hell is wrong with you? What the hell is wrong with you? Hey, let's put more safety language in our manuals. Yeah, that'll work. That'll prevent no. Good God. It's today Tuesday?
Today is Tuesday.
I have a pounding headache and it's Tuesday because yesterday was a complete epic disaster. Nothing going right. Okay, so let's start with, I'm going to bounce this off you. I want you to think before you vote. It's always important to think before you vote. And boy, I think this is close to a tie for different reasons. Bigger idiot. Urban Meyer, John Gruden. That's a tough one. Oh, boy. Now really think about that. I mean,
yeah, they're both
idiots.
I think I'd give the nod to Gruden, but just by a hair, because I remember seeing the video of Urban Meyer and just doing like literally a face palm.
Yeah.
On myself, like what an idiot. But I think I would say Gruden takes it by a little bit.
I mean, this is just the world we live in. And funny enough, apparently that happened, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's really not the world we live in because it's 10 years. But the fact of the matter that it came out right now, 10 years later and being used again, this is great stuff. You got to love the litigation psychology. And by the reason why the story is relevant is because the Gruden stuff came out because of litigation, right? That's why all that stuff was preserved and saved and then leaked. Steve, I'm not sure how many cases you've had in which you have it's typically business litigation where you have some pretty ugly emails that are embarrassing. Yeah, that's
the whole thing, right? Like, write emails assuming that they'll be used against you at some point in litigation.
Email like a CEO. It's like, yes, period. No, period.
That's right.
Thank you, period. No emojis, no smiley faces, no humor, right? You can't do that.
Yeah.
Gosh. Steve, on today's episode, I want to go because what we're both really good at, which doesn't work with every witness or client, we're really good at sports analogies. And I studied sports psychology. I've done some sports psychology. And I think a lot of the principles and techniques of sports psychology really do apply to the witness training system. And I was trying to think about this is what one of the core skills that we teach. I think it's the most difficult witness skill that we teach. And it's a skill that, yes, I invented. I'm taking full credit for this. We call it forcing cognition, where it's a gap of time. Well, first of all, the word forcing is a bad word. Forcing is not a positive word. But this is where the witness needs to force their brain to do something that they don't want to do. Remember, the brain's wired neurocognitively for efficiency.
Right.
It's not wired for effectiveness. Imagine if you took 2 to 5 seconds every day to make every decision. Before you said 2 to 5 seconds. You'd be a jellyfish by 3 o'clock, right? Or by noon, your brain would turn to mush. It just doesn't make any sense, right? And so we teach witnesses the skill forcing cognition, which means forcing in a 2 to 5 second gap of time to maximize cognition before you open your yapper. Now, imagine if we went through life and all did that. Imagine how much better off we'd be. Imagine how much less trouble we'd both be in if we actually just used our brain at triple the capacity that we typically do before we opened our mouths.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's too many times, right? Like you said, people just fire off something and then you want to pull it back later. But once as I always tell witnesses, that's a bell you can't unring, especially in litigation. I mean, you do it. Yeah. We do it in society, and we can say, "Oh man, sorry, I didn't mean that." But you do it in litigation.
Didn't mean that. Yeah, didn't mean that. Well, so I came up with some, and there's the reason why this 2 to 5 second, because I think this 2 to 5 second gap. I think everything else after that is really highly dependent upon this, because I can tell you this: witnesses that go too fast minimize their cognition, and they step on landmines and make mistakes. So the number one weakness we see, number one problem with witnesses, by far, number one ranked, is speed.
Yep.
And neurocognitive efficiency as opposed to neurocognitive effectiveness. And that effectiveness requires energy and effort, and that's that 2 to 5 seconds. So I went online and looked up NFL quarterback release windows. Just take a wild guess what it is. Wild guess.
It's less than a second.
Nope.
No.
Tom Brady was the fastest. The window.
Oh, okay. That's probably, I would say, 3 to 4 seconds.
2 to 4 seconds.
Oh, okay.
The window. The fastest in the league through like the first 4 weeks was Tom Brady at 1.9 seconds. But that's the average, right? Remember, so on a deeper drop back. But here's the point, and the reason I'm using this analogy is you have this window of time to make decisions, right?
Right.
And when you look at Trevor Lawrence, who's the goofball out for the Jets that's just getting his Zach mom's Wilson. Like amazing. Yeah, I see more of his mother than I do Zach Wilson. Yeah. His mom's great. I love his mom. But he's getting crushed. And the reason why is they struggle to use the proper cognition within the 2 to 4 second window, and they make mistakes, right? Hey, Mahomes did it. Everybody, that first year is really, really tough. And what do the quarterbacks say in years 2 and 3? The game has slowed down.
Yeah.
No. That is completely wrong. What they mean is my brain has adjusted, right? Now, right. In the same 2 to 4 seconds, I make better decisions. Why? Because I took a year to throw a lot of interceptions and do this all wrong. So one of the key purposes, now I'm trying to circle this back around to litigation psychology, is the process of witness training. I think it's critical that the witness does the same thing, right, Steve? I mean, the witness, before they throw the ball, right? Before you fire that ball, you need to be knowing you're throwing it to the right receiver. The witness is doing the exact same thing. And before they commit to an answer, they got to be sure it's the right target. I mean, speed. I mean, you've heard the phrase speed kills, right? Yeah. Which I think should be the title of this podcast if our producers will allow us. Speed kills. And what that means is that speed is generally on an athletic field, or it's generally a good thing, right? But but there are some situations where it's not, right? Now think about this. If you do things too quickly, right? For example, I mean, your son's a monster baseball player, and I know he pitches. If the pitcher's pitching, not speed kills, pitching too fast, as in the velocity of the ball, but is cutting corners on motion, right?
Right.
And delivery and mechanics because he wants to pitch more efficiently. That's not a good thing, right? It's going to fall down.
It's not. Leads to injuries, right? Leads to errors, leads to walks, leads to all sorts of things.
Yeah. And then how many times you watch college basketball, right? And some freshman point guard, gets the pass, and then it's the first pass of that particular possession, and he just jacks up a three and clanks it off. And you're going, dude, what do you do? Like time leads to better answers because you get to maximize cognition. And again, I guess a fast break is a good thing when you dunk the ball and that goes really, really fast. But in most cases, I think it's the opposite. I think as we maximize cognition, witnesses get better answers. The problem is, and Steve talked, because I know that you work with a lot of witnesses on this, the discomfort with not answering immediately is like through the roof, right? It feels really awkward.
Yeah, and I usually talk about embracing the power of the awkward silence. And I think Elon Musk is one of the best at doing that. And if you ever watch like an interview with him where he's doing it, it's painful to watch, but you can tell that he's actually putting a lot of thought into his answers, and he's being very careful in how he answers, and he's being very thoughtful. And yeah, a lot of times witnesses just feel like they need to answer because, like I said, it's very, very uncomfortable to actually sit there when someone else is looking at you, waiting for a response.
Yeah.
And you feel the need, you have to give an answer right away, and it feels very uncomfortable. But it's one of those things that witnesses just need to learn to just get over. I mean, I always say, do whatever you're going to do before the deposition, do whatever you're going to do after the deposition, but within that confines of however long your deposition lasts, you're going to have to change the way your thought process is, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be for the best for you.
But what a lot of people don't understand, it's a skill. Okay, listening is a skill. Thinking is a skill. Responding is a skill. And that's where and that's where a lot of attorneys don't understand. Well, I told my witness to listen, and think carefully. It's like, you can't just tell somebody.
Right.
You got to teach them how to do that. It's a skill that gets better with practice and time. And so I thought maybe we talk a little bit about some sports psychology today, because an athlete is performing, right, in front of an audience. A performer, a musician, a dancer. I mean, these are all performance issues. A witness is performing. I'm sorry, they are. They're carrying out a skill set in front of an audience. Okay. And so there's a couple of different things that, I would teach athletes, which I teach all the witnesses, because I think it's really important, because you have to protect that 2 to 5 second gap of cognition. We've talked about on other podcasts how fatigue wears people down, and then that gap starts to get smaller, and then they start making mistakes, which is why the breaks are so important. And it takes a lot of energy to use that 2 to 4 or 5 seconds. It's really important. But I noticed that witnesses, particularly early on, tend to abandon the 2 to 5 seconds pretty quickly. I think a lot of that is nerves. A lot of that is kind of getting warmed up in the process. But relaxation, number one. I think, I'm sure you're aware of this. I don't think the audience is a general public. Every PGA golfer, every single one of them has their own personal sports psychologist. And you know what the number one thing they work on? Relaxation training. Because that's how their swing goes off, because they start having anxiety, throws off their breathing, cortisol starts going throughout their veins, right, from stress, throws off your muscle mechanics. Boom, you're hitting it in the woods, or you're missing that the big putt because you pushed it. And it's the number one skill taught by a sports psychologist. And quite frankly, it's one of the main skills that we teach, because what I do know is that if a witness cannot relax, they can't think. right? I mean, they can't think. Nervous people can't think, which is, again, another reason why the desensitization process is so important, in witness prep. But I can see witnesses like almost mouth breathing and upper chest breathing and not relax. And I time out. What are you doing? They're like, well, I'm just so nervous. I don't know what's coming next. So being in that environment can lead to a good natural adjustment, but they got to learn how to breathe. I tell these witnesses, I'm like, by the way, you can't sit there like, here's the question, then 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. Okay, now I can't. You can't do that, right? That's dumb. But what you can do is question, answer. That's 3 seconds. That's one breath in, one breath out. Keeps you relaxed. And I try to get them to focus on their breathing. Again, you watch any look at the guy going to the free throw line. Talk about a pre-shot routine, right? It's like a pre-answer routine. Every witness should have a pre-answer routine. These golfers have a pre-putt routine. They have a pre-driver routine. Every basketball player has was it John Stockton that used to do this with his face to say hi to his kids on TV? Yeah. I mean, everybody has a routine before they do whatever they're going to do for their performance. I think the witness can do the same thing. I think it should be focused on breathing. I mean, have you had witnesses where they kind of get all amped up and then before you know it, they abandon the game plan and they get into that speed trap because they're not breathing. They've lost their focus and they've allowed the plaintiff's attorney just to take over the deposition.
Well, I think that's exactly what you said at the very end about allowing the plaintiff attorney to take over the deposition. And that's where you see it, right? Is they start off on a good path of staying slow and breathing. But then what ends up happening is plaintiff's counsel starts trying to speed them up. And rather than take the time and allow themselves to slow the pace down, they get into that rhythm because then it feels good. Then it feels like the normal everyday conversation. Yeah,
it feels good. Right? That's the problem. And here's the problem with making mistakes at deposition, and it makes no sense whatsoever. It's like going into the Matrix, right? I tell the witnesses, I'm like, if it feels good, you are really screwing this up.
Yeah.
If it feels terrible, you're probably doing a good job, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so unnatural. I mean, nobody talks that slow, right? No. I mean, no one pauses like that. And it's just, I think a lot of it's our society, just the way we are. I mean, I know if I go, that's why I got to take my damn phone with me to the gym. Because if I don't answer an email or a text timely, somebody's pissed at me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, actually, I take it to listen to my podcast or listen to music is why I take it. But now it's all in one. But yeah, it's like this society. I mean, we are like speed is really good. And then you take somebody, and by the way, it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse, meaning speed and efficiency, the reinforcement of those behaviors is really, really high. So now this is probably the hardest time in human history to prep a witness, isn't it? I mean, because of the speed of everything else. I try to use as many analogies as I can to make people comfortable, because everybody comes into witness prep uncomfortable. And I told the one guy the other day, I'm like, listen, you're used to driving the car at 75 miles per hour. Well, I literally need you to drive it at like 20 for the entire dep. And he's like, oh, I don't like driving 20. I'm like, I know. He goes, it's uncomfortable to drive 20. I go, I know, but that's what I need. Steve, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you're a social psychologist. I don't see these trends getting any better. I think it's going to become harder and harder to prep witnesses because I think technology is changing the brain, which is altering cognition, which makes our jobs difficult, and it's going to get worse.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, we're a society of instant gratification, right? And they talk about how I've seen studies where they talk about the release of dopamine that you get when you check in your phone about whether or not there's a text message or an email.
Or doing that right now.
Yeah, see?
See, I've already violated the rules.
And that's the point. I mean, how many times have you ever seen an email where somebody fires off an email and then they send a follow-up email with additional information that they forgot to send in the previous email because they wanted to get out the email to you so quick rather than let it sit, for 15 minutes. So I think, to your point, your instant gratification, we want to do things quickly because, like you said, it makes us feel good. And as you said, if you feel good in a deposition, you screwed it up. I mean, you should not walk out of a deposition feeling like, and the other thing too is when we talk about answering too quick or not thinking fully, is that's when people will essentially, barf their guts on the table because they want to get the whole story out and then just set the record straight because they want to feel good at the end and feel like they absolved themselves of everything. And as we know, deposition is obviously not the time to do that. But it goes back to the gratification. I have to feel like I got everything out. I have to feel like I got my side heard. And rather than pulling back and doing things that don't feel comfortable, I do what feels good.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And so there's times I've actually taken witnesses and literally put them through the actual sports psychology breathing techniques, the diaphragmatic breathing, full volume tidal breathing, to get them to calm the hell down. It works every time. And the key, which I find amazing, is, and you've seen this in the witness preps you see it like when the witness brain hits the groove, they're good. Right. Yeah. And then you got 2, 3, 4 seconds between each. It's good, but they got to get there first. They have to realize, this feels terrible, but their brain has to learn this terrible feeling is actually a safety net. This is really, really helping me. So there's a lot going on there with that gap of time. But I would say this, as a witness training expert, without that gap of time, the witness is screwed. Period. If they don't think, they have no chance. Number one, in the grand scheme of things. Number two, you're going against a reptile attorney. Speed kills. That's when speed really, really kills. So this forced cognition is really important. I think teaching relaxation skills to these witnesses, which, by the way, attorneys are incapable of. I say attorneys make people more nervous. See, attorneys don't make people relax. They do the exact opposite. And so that's why these skills are so important. Secondly, which I think this never gets talked about. This could probably be a separate podcast. This could be a paper. Could write a paper on this. Is the second skill that sports psychologists focus on is the skill of positive thinking. Being able to reframe negative events. Think about today. Okay, so 2021 going on 22. Oh man, I've struggled with some cognitive reframing, Steve. I don't know about you, but I'm trying to take negatives and not let them get to me. And what the athlete is taught, because listen, I mean, you coach baseball for years. What do you tell your son after he strikes out? Because I tell you, when I was playing baseball, well, first of all, my dad was screaming at me. He was like, this is back in the day. I shit you not. In 1982, when I'm in like third grade in Little League, all the dads brought beer to the game. And every dad is just plastered at noon in the stand. And I strike out. My dad would start yelling at me. And that strikeout in inning 2 would stick in my mind the rest of that game. And then I'm fumbling the ball. I'm overthrowing first base from shortstop. I mean, the negative thoughts that happen after a failure within an event just destroys athletic performance. It can destroy witness performance. I mean, what do you tell adolescents after they strike out? Because they got to mentally keep it together, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you look for the positives in it. Did they foul the ball off? Were they taking close pitches? Did they run the count up and have a good at bat? But I think the biggest thing I can vividly think of an example right now where we had a guy strike out. He was really upset. He was struggling for the whole weekend. And I told him, we need you here. We need you present. We need you to just, brush it off, because I'm telling you right now, there's going to come a time where we're going to need you and you're going to come through and this is all going to go away. And sure enough, I swear, we were down by 1 run. This kid hits it. walks it off, and we end up winning the game. And it was like his one hit of the whole tournament. But keeping him in the cognitive frame of mind, in the right frame of mind of understanding, like, okay, bad things have happened, but I can't let it steamroll. And with witnesses, it's the same thing, right?
You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be, listen, I'm sorry, witnesses, you're not going to be perfect. And here's the other problem. We deal with a lot of corporate executives, physicians, right? People that strive to be perfect. And boy, when they fuck up, they really, really get down on themselves, or they get mad, and it can screw up the rest of the testimony. And I'm watching NFL the other. Did you watch the Packers Bengals game? They had like 4 field goals at the end. Miss. Went to overtime, another miss, and then finally. But it's like after the kicker misses the field goal, like you said, it's important for coaches and players to say, "Hey, shake it off, get back to good men. We're gonna need you again." Right. And the same thing at the deposition, right? If you step on a grenade, right, step on a landmine, and that blast goes off, doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world, right? Some witnesses are going to screw up and they may start going too fast. Well, it's the attorney's job to maybe take a break, right? They may say too much in an answer. It's going to happen. Witnesses are going to make mistakes, but I do see a lot of witnesses in our training sessions kind of kicking themselves after they make mistakes. And I think that they need to go into this understanding you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You really, really don't. And it's hard to teach that when you're dealing, honestly, like now let's go on the other end. When you're dealing with the truck driver, maybe the lower level nurse, when you say you don't have to be perfect, they're like, perfect, good, great. Like they're fine with that, right? They're totally okay with that. There's no issue with them. But when you're dealing with your cardiothoracic surgeon, your C-level executive, these people, they have to be perfect, or it's like this narcissistic injury that they can't get over. I don't know. Do you think? I personally think this is going to sound weird. It's going to sound weird. I think in many instances, I find it more difficult to work with really, really super smart witnesses than someone of average intelligence. I think it's really difficult.
I agree 100%.
Like, they don't bend. They don't bend. And they think they know. It's like, dude, you gotta, it's a headache.
I think the other thing that I find is this forcing cognition for them is really difficult as well, because they've moved up to their positions of where they're at by being smart, by being Johnny on the spot, by having all the answers at the time. And they more so than anyone, because they're used to people turning and looking to them to have the answers in the middle of a meeting. They don't like the feeling and just can't force themselves and allow themselves to take time before they respond. So I think for those group of people, this forcing cognition is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. They just have the most trouble out of anything to try to slow themselves down.
And it's hard to teach. It's hard to teach, and it takes. But then once they get it, they get it. But the other thing they're susceptible to is so again, I'm trying to keep this parallel of sports and sports psychology and litigation psychology. The same thing happens. It happened during all the football games today. Saturday was terrible. College football is starting to really, really irk me. And don't get me started on the targeting, and the refs are horrendous. But the way these kids behave on the field just makes me nuts. But this has always been around. I'd say definitely since TV, and then definitely social media, is the amount of taunting and trash talking is absolutely incredible. Why do you think that happens? We do this in our witness training. It's called the head game.
Right.
The plaintiff attorney does this. The witness gives a great answer, and the attorney's like, serious? Like, what? Come on. Who are you fooling here? I don't think you answered the question. Now, let me ask it again. They taunt the witness, just like the cornerback, right? And so the wide receiver drop the touchdown. And I'm going, son, dude. And what happens after that? That cornerback is up in the ear of that receiver doing what? I'm in your head. 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 Right. And then that receiver has to go back to the huddle. And if that processes, that guy's going to drop another ball. Okay. Now, see, in golf, they don't do this. It's more of a gentleman's sport, right? Right. Somebody misses the putt. You can't say, suck on it. You can't do that. Right. But in football, right. I mean, look at base. I mean, your favorite sport, baseball. I mean, you get into a pitch. I've seen batters get into a pitcher's head and the pitcher loses. They get upset and they can't throw strikes.
Oh, it's over. And the funny thing you say that is, I'm in College Station, Texas A&M University, and they're very famous for, as the pitcher starts to throw, multiple balls in a row, ball 5, ball 6. Yeah. I mean, crowd. You get a big crowd doing that, man. You should see how bad this pitcher struggles to throw a strike after that, when you got the whole stadium just barreling down on you.
Yep. It's unbelievable. So I think that we've proven that there are sports psychology techniques that can be used in witness training. I think there's a lot of parallels. But let's wrap up this podcast by reporting. I sent you the text yesterday on I think it was a Sunday Night Football, or was it whenever the Chiefs? Okay, so one of the Chiefs. So our last podcast, which by the way, I just put, it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. But it's also very scientific. But we've been going over week by week. Steve and I go over baseball, basketball, football. These fans continue just to beat the living shit out of each other. It's unbelievable. And these are your jurors, folks. These are jury eligible people for the most part. So it was yesterday when, of course, someone's filming, not trying to help the situation. They want to make sure they could put it on Twitter. Someone's filming, and I think it was the Kansas City Chiefs fan just got absolutely clobbered. Yeah. And then the day before that, it was a couple of the college football games. There were fights, and I mean, several NFL games. There were people throwing haymakers, and it's happening every week. And it just goes to show you that, let's kind of end on this. When you have obviously emotion and alcohol, really, really, really bad combo. Now, the good thing is you don't get that combo in jury selection, but you better learn how to assess the emotional status of your jurors. Otherwise, again, there's probably not going to be haymakers thrown in deliberations, but you can see how those emotions come out, and then people start doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of anger that I have seen personally on the internet that I just haven't seen in a while. And yeah, that could definitely bleed over, like you said, not haymakers, but definitely perceptions of cases and whether or not someone is sympathetic to a plaintiff attorney or a plaintiff, injured plaintiff. Yeah. Before they might have been very sympathetic. Now they're probably less sympathetic. And those people who are dyed-in-the-wool defense jurors are probably going to be even more so. So yeah, it's crazy times with. I mean, the courtroom. I mean, luckily for trial attorneys, there's always a negative stimulus that pushes the person. It's not just alcohol, because there's plenty of sober people on airplanes that have gotten in fights. Although alcohol is a problem there too, but not nearly as much as it is at the ballpark or the football. But the negative thing is, okay, well, if I'm in the stadium, there are people around me. A, I'm sitting really close to people, but B, I don't like a lot of these people because they're wearing a different jersey. So that's my negative stimulus. I'm going to lose my mind. And on the airplane, it's the mask wearing and people, sitting too close to one another, and then the flight. This came out the article this week. Hey, maybe all the fights are because flight attendants are not being particularly nice to people, and you got people firing. There's always a negative stimulus that I think is really the trigger. I don't think alcohol is the trigger, because alcohol is not a trigger. It's not. It has a very, very different role, but there are several triggers like that. The courtroom and the deliberation room, I think, purposely doesn't have those triggers, right? It's a very controlled environment, really designed to
limit emotion in a way to keep everybody on the same page. And so that's why, at least with the mock trials we've done and talking to attorneys and things like that, I haven't seen anything crazy in a deliberation or courtroom environment. In fact, I mean, I'll go out there and go out on a limb for now, knock on wood. A lot of what I'm seeing right now is exactly what I saw in 2018, 2017, 2016. I don't see a tremendous difference in that controlled environment. I go out to the grocery store, I see clerks getting knocked out. Right. I see road rage has tripled. Fights on airplanes. I go to a stadium and I got to have my head on a swivel. Those environments have completely changed. I mean, I think it's just the benefit of the court system, and having bailiffs with guns probably helps too. Just keeps everybody in a very controlled state of mind. And I have no reason yet to see that changing going forward. Why don't you close up on that?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, one of the biggest things, it's a difference in environment. You know, you and I have had this conversation before, where I can see litigation coming from these stadiums because security is not doing their job, right? I mean, how many times when you and I were talking the other day, I was talking about a situation where one of the fans was yelling up at the security saying, "Hey, do your job. Do your job. These guys are fighting down here. Do your job." So I think to your point, in the courtroom, right, you got the judge. Everybody always defers to the judge and they're very respectful to the judge. You got the bailiff. You have a lot of different aspects that there's accountability.
Authority and accountability. Right? Authority and accountability
anywhere else. You knock someone out at the grocery store, it goes up on Twitter, you walk away, and nothing happens after that.
I know. And that's why people post the stuff they post. They do what they do. I mean, go to a nightclub, right? And there's 5 bouncers that weigh 275 and bench 500 pounds. You ain't screwing around. You're not doing it. Right? But, you know, you go to a stadium, you know, and you got, 8 rent-a-cops when you probably need 25 in one section. No one's scared of them. No accountability. I don't know, but we will continue to discuss the human behavior aspects because these are jury eligible people. But cool. Why don't you close us out, Steve? Thanks for setting this up. I think we're approaching 100. We're approaching the end of the year. And I think there's going to be, I think the world's going to continue to change into 2022. And we're just going to have to keep adjusting by doing our jury research, to keep, honing our witness training skills, because it's a pretty fast moving world out there.
No, I agree. Yep. Always adapting. We're always trying to get more information, gather information, tweak things, make adjustments. Like you said, learn from jurors, learn from attorneys, learn from everything that's going on around us, just to make us better at our job so that we can help our clients make better informed decisions and have them have more, beneficial outcomes. So with that, I will sign off and say thanks for joining us. This has been another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc.